Hello and welcome to today's lesson of 3D drawing for Model Railway. In today's lesson I'm going to show you how to take a file that we've drawn in CAD and how to transfer it to a file that you can actually use to send to a printer. I'll also show you some tips on how to potentially save a little bit of money on getting some of your prints a little bit cheaper and some things to look out for. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is turn this drawing into a file that we can send to the printer. So we're going to come up the top here, go File, 3D Print, and then we're going to select the body. And we're going to make sure this tick box here is unchecked because I don't use Mesh Mix as my print utility, so I have that as unchecked. So once it's selected, we can click on OK. And you can see it's going to export it as an STL file or .stl. And I'm going to put it into this folder here. So I'm going to click on Save. That's now exported out of Fusion 360, ready for us to send over to our slicing software, which is the software that creates a file that the printer can actually read. Okay, so now I've jumped across to the slicing software. I use Chitubox. I find it's the best software that I've tried that's for slicing. Although there is other manufacturers you can use, like Anycubic have their own, or there's Lightyear as well that you could use. So within here, this is the build plate or the printable area of the printer. I'll show you the settings that we've got down here. So the machine setting I've got as my profile is an Anycubic Photon, which is the printer I use. The resolution is automatically set within the printer, as well as the size of the print build plate. Okay. The resin at the top here, this is preset, the top, and the resin cost, that's the price I pay per litre in pounds. It gives you an approximation once you slice the file as to how much that would then cost to produce the print itself. These are my print settings, so I've got a layer height of 0.03. I'm printing an N-gauge, so I find that I get the best detail resolution of this. You can go down lower, but I'm quite happy with what I've got here. The bottom layer count is the number of layers or print touching the build plate. The exposure time is how long it normally prints per layer. The bottom exposure is the number of seconds it will take to print each layer at the bottom. The light off delay is how long it will take between each layer. The lift distance is how far it comes off of the resin every time it's done a layer, and the distance it does it as well. And then it's got the lift speed, so how fast it comes away from the build plate once it's finished each layer. Okay, so let's get our container file. So we're going up the top here to open file, and we're going to search through the files. And we'll select it and bring it in. That automatically brings it in. Okay, so as you can see, it's put it flat to the build plate. What we've got within here is some controls here where we can move the position of it across the X, Y, and Z axis, and then we can rotate it, and you can see how each one you can select the position and just move it around to wherever you want it to be. Back to 0. And then you've got scaling, so you can increase the size. This is how you can change something that's in N-gauge up to 00HO, or vice versa, come back down in the scales. All you've got to do is work a little bit of maths out to work out which scale it was printed, and then how to get it back to the scale that you require. And then this is so that you can mirror whatever you've got on this build plate. Okay, so the first thing you would think is I could just print it like this. Well, you can, but the issue you've got is only these four corners are touching the build plate, and there's nothing supporting all this middle bit. So all this middle bit would probably fail within the print. Even if that was completely flat, what you would end up getting, and these four corners weren't here, and you did print it perfectly flat on the build plate, you'd end up with what we call elephant foot, which is where remember I said the first 5 layers are printed at a longer time within the settings? That's so that adheres to this build plate. And what you end up doing is those first 5 layers actually swell out like the shape of an elephant foot. So the first 5 layers will be quite thick, and then it'll come back in size. So you're actually going to lose some of your print quality on that bottom. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how much this would cost to print, just as a rough guide, just printing as it is in Engage. So if we just click on Slice, you can see the software just runs through a little bit of processing here, and then it tells you down the side here that it's going to use approximately 21 millilitres of resin at a cost of 68 pence, and it will take 2 hours and 52 minutes to print that item. Now, as I say, that's only an approximation. You will lose resin through general wastage and cleanup. Okay. Now, the reason that's at 68% is that container is solid. So what we can do is we can go into our Fusion again, and we can take out some of this resin out of the middle. So I'll show you quickly how to do that. Okay, so jumping back into Fusion here, what we can do to save that resin is if we turn this back over and we draw a sketch on this inside plane. You could use the shell tool, although this won't work with shell because of the 4 corners. So what we can use is the offset tool, just offset on the edge and bring it in. Now you can go, I wouldn't go much below a millimetre in thickness, but I'm going to go for minus 1.5 just to make sure I've got a nice sturdy edge around the outside. And then I'm going to extrude that . 15.5 millimeters. Okay, click on OK, and then we can do the file 3D print, select the body, make sure this is unticked, click on OK. I'm going to save this as body 2 so we know that that's the different one, and then we'll jump back across into Chitubox. Okay, so we're back in Chitubox. We'll remove the original item, but just using the dustbin. We can select this body one here, use the dustbin at the top, gets rid of it, and then we'll go and open up and bring in the other body. Okay, and if we slice it this time, you can see that by removing that inside, we've kept the same time because it's still the same height, but we've gone from 68 pence of resin down to 18 pence of resin. Now obviously that's quite a large chunk of savings. You'd also get better curing from this because obviously the stuff in the middle won't be able to cure properly afterwards under your UV light after you printed it. Okay, so what we're actually going to do is come back out of that slice. Okay, now what you would generally need to do is to support this whole body here away from this build plate. Okay, so you could just go into supports, click plus platform, making sure it's on medium. I generally use medium supports. There is 3 different settings in here, but I find that the heavy ones are way too heavy, too thick. The light ones are only really useful for tiny little objects because they haven't got much grip to the model itself, whereas the medium seems to give me the best support. Down the side here you can see all the settings that I've got for the supports here, and these are the settings for the middle section, the supports. The bottom of the supports can change the shape of the base on the build plate, and the same with the raft here. Okay, so they're all my settings. Okay, you could add an easy option is just press plus platform and it automatically support the whole model for you. The problem with this is it doesn't always get the bits that you want, and sometimes it gets bits that you really don't want it to support, and then that just gives you unnecessary scarring on the build of the model that's just not needed. So realistically, that's not what you want to do. Okay, you can print models of various orientations, and what you're looking to do is be able to print the model with the least amount of supports on any surface that you would be seeing as possible, while also maintaining the lowest cross section against the printer laser head LED. So here you can see I've got all this section is touching the LED at the same time. If I was to orientate this model at an angle, I'd probably be able to reduce this by, well, depending on the position, but easily half to 3/4 of this would be touching the build plate. And what you end up with is large areas like this touching. The more area that touches, the more it's what called peel forces you get from the build plate moving away from the LED to allow new resin to go underneath it. Whereas when you've got less touching, you're going to end up with less peel force. Now, the higher the peel force, the more likely you are to have lines in your print or jumps on the print where it's wobbled inside the printer. So it's a good practice to try and angle it as best you can to try and reduce this cross section where possible. So if we jump back out of the supports part, you can come back across here and we're going to rotate this. Now, what I would look at here is this face here has got all this detail on it. If I have that facing down towards the build plate, I'm probably going to have to run some supports potentially off of here, off of the lock we've got on there. That's it, off this lock here, because you'd end up with this line here that would be completely unsupported, the same you would get underneath these. So what I'd be tempted to do is rotate this round so that that face is rotated away from the build plate, because on this edge we don't have that issue because these will all be supported from this bottom plane here. Okay. Now, the best thing also we can do is rotate on this angle as well. Okay, so we then only got one corner that starts and then it works its way up across the model. Okay, we will need to still have a couple of supports in here for a couple of parts, but nowhere near as many as we'd have to here. And by doing this, as you can see, I've massively reduced the cross section of how much is touching the print LED at any one time. You're going to get much better print quality from doing that. Okay, so we're going back into the supports and we're going to place these supports manually. So you've got add support, delete support, okay, and then you can edit at the bottom here. So if we rotate this round, okay, we're going to have the first support has got to be at the lowest point on the model. So that's going to be right on here. So I'm going to try and get this support right in this bottom corner. Okay, so that's now supported so that it's got something that's touching the build plate from that point there. Okay, and then I'm going to work my way across the model here. Just put in supports every couple of millimeters. Okay, and I'm going to have another support right in this bottom corner of this leg here, because that bit, if I didn't support here, this bit here would be floating. So I've got to get one right in that bottom corner. Okay. Next, I'm going to do is going to work my way up this side here. So I'm doing the same thing, going along the edge here, adding supports every few millimeters. So we're coming all the way to the top here, and as you can see at the top here, we've got the same. Let me rotate this round. We've got the same issue with this leg sitting out slightly, so we're going to do support right in the corner of that as well. Okay. Okay. So the next thing is we've got to come all the way up this side. So we'll just come down to the bottom here and just run these same supports up the side here. Make sure I've got that corner there. Yep, looks good. And then we'll run a few supports along that face. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is put some supports on the inside of the container here. So rotate to the bottom so we can actually see underneath it, and then we can zoom in and move it around so we can add some supports in here. So again, we're just in here, I'm looking to do them randomly just to give some support to those inside surfaces so that when it prints, you can see there's a couple here which are actually going to be on the inside of the container, going from the inside of the container to the top. I'm not really bothered about them because they're just helping to support the inside, and it's not going to affect what actually is seen on the outside of the container. Okay. So I'm going to go all the way along here, adding these in. Okay, and I'm going to put a couple on this side wall as well, just to help with the support of that. And what I'm trying to do here is get a couple that are close enough that it will bring one of these supporting legs from this side across, because that helps to just tie this edge in nice and straight, stops it wobbling at all. Like that. So they're all supported all the way around. Now I've deliberately left a couple of areas where I know that I'm going to have islands so that I can show you what I mean by them. So if we scroll this down, I'll rotate this so you can see. The first island we're going to get is just here on this corner. So this little island here, but it's completely unsupported in the printer. Yeah, so that for definite would fail within the printer. Okay, so what I would generally see, you can hear just about see it there. You would have to put a support on there. Okay, so we're going to rotate that back up, and for that one, I'm just going to try and find right on the very corner, get that support on, just on the edge there. There's going to be one just on the corner of this as well, so we'll take it down slightly more so we've got a better view. Okay, now they're not the best there, but that's the least that we need. We've got to do that to be able to print it. Okay, so we've got those supports in there. So now what we'll do is we'll come back out of there and we'll slice that into a file that the printer can use. It's taking slightly long here, but it's slightly taller, and obviously you've got all the supports and stuff. It's trying to work out each layer that the printer's got to print. Okay, so there we go. It's going to take roughly 10 millilitres of resin, approximately 30 to 40 pence, and it's now going to take almost 8.5 hours to print that. Okay. Now that's very uneconomical there, because obviously we're only printing one container. Okay, so what we can do is move this container over to the side there. Okay, and then at the top here we've got clone current model. Okay, so if we click on there, we bring another one in. We'll see if we can fit another one inside next to it. Okay, so now we have two. And we've probably got enough room on the end here to have one of the 20-foot containers rotated the other direction. Now, if you weren't overly concerned about rotating on this axis, so we've got this diagonal side here, you could, I think, you could quite comfortably get 3 of these side by side if they were all going up straight. And then you'd still have room for your 20-foot container on the end there. Now, if you slice that now, you'll see that it'll takes just as long to slice because it's the same number of layers. What you'll be able to do though is this will now print 2 models in the same length of time as it would take one to print. So it's not specifically how big each model is, how much resin it's using, it's how long it takes to go from the build plate to the last part of the model at the very top here. Okay, so it's still going to take approximately 8.5 hours, and the resin volume will just double there. Okay. As I say, I think I could get 3 of these in if you rotated these back off of this axis, the green axis, for you to rotate that back so they were horizontal that direction across the build plate. Get 3 of them quite comfortably in there, and then the 20-foot container on the end here. which is then going to give you the most optimal use of the printer possible. But this is the best way to get quality wise, is to rotate it across the 2-axis, so that you're going from one point and you're not having a flat edge in any direction. So there you can see 8.5 hours, double the cost of the resin. Okay, then you just do file save, and then that then turns it into a photon file for me. I could just save that as 40-foot containers, and then send that file across to my printer. Okay, hope that's of use to you, and you understand now how we change a file from Fusion into a file that's printer ready. Okay, if you get any questions about that, then please feel free to leave a comment below. If you've liked the video, press the like button, and please subscribe, because it really does make a difference to how YouTube see the videos. Thanks for watching.